Welcome back to The Great Conversation. Today we're talking about how we plan on staying married once our children leave the house. So the one thing that we did is we started reading the great books. And that has given us so many things to talk about besides our children. And then this has led into now doing the great conversation together. So we have this life project. That way we're not always only talking about the children. We're not always only discussing that. And so as our children go older, we continue in conversation about things and we continue to stay inspired and excited about the conversations we're having together. So that's the idea.
Whew.
Wow.
We got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I will say that this isn't something that we set out to do.
No.
I mean,
it wasn't like, let's pick a life project.
Yeah, let's pick a life project and this is going to keep us married for years to come. It's more something that we've always kind of done projects together. We've always had hobbies that we do together.
Yeah, we always say our life is our hobby.
Yeah.
We just have a hobby life.
Yeah. And so this is more of a project that we felt like maybe has longevity, but also has purpose, that also helps people.
Yeah.
And it's also a challenge. Because I think we know a lot of people, at least I do, that they do marathons together.
Yeah.
This is very different. It's very unique because it influences a lot of other people.
Yes. And it challenges us intellectually. It challenges us to confront ideas that I might assume you feel the same way as I do. For instance, as we're reading through the great books, I'll say, I felt this way about how the Cyclops responded to Odysseus. And you're like, well, that's totally wrong. This is how I feel about it. Mm-hmm. And so it allows us to kind of just continue to dig deeper into our relationship and learn more about each other. And so that's what I love about the complexity of the great books, about the great conversation, because we'll have conversations and I think you're on the same page with me and all of a sudden you're not. Mm-hmm. And that's been something that
even
has been fun here.
The great conversation.
Cheers.
We're having a Hudson Mule.
Yes.
Even the great conversation itself has been its own topic of dispute for us. Mm-hmm. Where is this going?
Yeah, what are we doing?
What are we doing? How are we actually helping our tribe?
Community.
Our community.
Yeah.
Where is this
going? Do we call it a community or do we call it a tribe or do we call it an audience? How do we talk to y'all?
Yeah, what? So is this going to be just about the great books, that we're reading the great books and we're just going to educate our audience on what we think that
because we're super qualified for that.
Yeah, what the idea of each book is, or is it going to be something else? And we've kind of had a hard time getting on the same page of what is this about?
Yeah.
Because the great conversation isn't about just the great books.
It's true.
It's about the idea of what the great books have done in our
liberal
culture.
Education.
Not even that, it's what the people of the liberal education are able to do. They're able to have a conversation and push Western civilization forward in a certain direction, and kind of everything that golden thread that's through our culture that we can go back and say, oh, it was referenced in this book because this book led us in this way. And so that's where the great conversation, us talking with y'all, this community that we're creating, this world of camaraderie that we want to create, is that we are all here to talk about the great conversation, what our culture is doing, where we're going.
Yes, where do we want to go?
And how we're a part of that because of the way that we're living.
Yeah. How
can we help y'all live kind of how this journey that we're going through of how to live better, how to build a life that we love to wake up to.
Yes.
And so that is the great conversation, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's changing and taking form in motion because we are changing and taking form in motion. Mm-hmm. This is not something that you just decide upon. I think Adler or Hutchins, no, it was Hutchins. Hutchins said it well. These great books are not to be read. They're to be read once. They're to be read over and over again because as you evolve, as you change as a person, they mean something different in every phase of your life. Mm-hmm. And so anything in our intellectual pursuits, as we grow, as I drink this and it's combined with, okay, so for instance, we made a mule, right? You drink a mule with rye, then you drink a mule with Irish whiskey, then you drink a mule with oat whiskey, right? It's a mule, but they're all different shapes and forms. So as you add different things, it changes the flavor. It changes how you experience that item.
Yeah.
A drink, for instance.
Yeah. So with this life project.
Yes.
We've decided on this. This is what's going to keep us married forever.
That's the plan.
Yeah. And I know that sounds really what's
hyperbole, I think is the right word for that.
What's the point of this conversation? Yeah.
I think the point of this conversation is there's too many sad endings to beautiful beginnings. And I hear a lot of my friends who love their parents deeply, and they're just saddened to see the parents separate. Of course, I mean, we all know that divorce is a very sad thing, and it's a tragedy. You know, it doesn't just hurt the individuals in the marriage; it hurts there's a fallout of everybody. And so, talking to my friends, a lot of the common thread that I hear is my parents just stopped talking. They didn't keep working together.
Okay.
And so the whole idea of the life project is how can you continue to talk? How can you continue to spend time together, to have things that you're working on that challenge you, that could bring up arguments, and then you have to work through those arguments. Because as you work through arguments, you build deeper bonds.
Okay.
Rather than just stuffing things down. When you are challenged to do something together, that means you have to work together. This wouldn't work if we didn't learn how to work together. And we had tons of arguments on the first few episodes that we literally had to reshoot some of these episodes because we were arguing. But then through this, we've learned how to work together more.
Okay.
You know?
So my question is,
Yes.
how does the project not just become the project, and then obviously the marriage is like separate from that? Like a project is kind of like a work. So how do we not just
Become business partners?
Yeah, how does it not just turn into that where it's like, okay, yeah, did that really save our marriage or, help us like have a great life together when it was just business? It was just a project. Like how does that keep us from becoming like your friends?
Yeah,
parents?
I think like the problem is what happens is when both of the people aren't on the same page. I think that's where the issue comes into play. And I think like I am always like under the assumption that we're on the same page, right? Because I'm like, we're doing this together, we're having fun, like we're learning this, like aren't we on the same page?
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't discuss that, then somebody could be left like you pulled a quick one over their head, right? Like I could be like, oh wow, this is feeding my wife intellectually and emotionally and spiritually, this whole conversation and this project. But then you could be over there going, well, no, it's not. And you've been distancing yourself from me. And I didn't even realize it. So I think you have to not only have a project that you're working through, but you have to discuss if that project is fulfilling certain areas of your marriage or your life. And if it's not, you have to be honest and say, no, like you've been missing the mark in this area. And then I have to be humble enough to say, I'm sorry, I'm going to do it differently.
Right, because the project is not like an end-all, save-all to your marriage. Like, it's not like having a life project together is going to make sure that we have a great marriage together.
And that takes us
for an example, like, I used to really like Rachel Hollis and her husband. Like, and they were like the marriage couple. They were doing business together. They had a life project together.
Yes.
And then one day
they
were divorced. Like, how did that happen? I thought y'all were like doing this marriage podcast and like helping everybody.
Yeah.
And then you're divorced. And so how does that not become us? Because they're even like, we can still be business partners. We're still great friends. But then their marriage side of things, which obviously the marriage side is so much more complex than just, the having a project together. Obviously something was missing.
Yes, and this takes us to part 2. We talked about doing a whole part 2, but I think part 2 fits in perfectly here.
Well, we don't have to move on to part 2, but
but this is what you're asking. Like this is part 2. Part 2 is like, are we on the same page, right? So for instance, I thought that this was fulfilling emotionally as much as it was me.
Right, because you work all the time, but then you were allowing this time for us to have this thing.
It was
together.
like, we have time together, and you felt, in a sense, abandoned emotionally, and so you were drifting apart. I didn't even realize it until our marriage was hurting in an emotional state. And so like what you're saying is, okay, Rachel Hollis and her husband, Dave Hollis, were great business partners, but emotionally they had grown apart.
Something, yeah.
Yeah, or whatever, right? And so that people watching this go, ha ha ha, you guys are so cute and naive, and it's like, yeah, possibly. And unless I asked you that question a couple weeks ago, this would have been my answer. And this was my answer. Like, life project is the answer to a successful marriage.
Yeah. Every married person should have a life project.
And then like 2 weeks...
Because they're going to be happy when their kids are young. They're going to be happy when their kids are in high school. And then when their kids leave, they're going to keep doing that and be so happy till the end of time.
Yeah, and I was. And I thought like I had it nailed. And I was like, I'm the smartest person ever. And then like literally 2 weeks ago, like I noticed you were drifting. And I was like, okay, so if it's not the life project, like what is it? And the second part is like emotional awareness of your partner.
And this is the whole like making sure that you are, what's your quote? The unexamined life.
The unexamined life is not worth living.
So like examining everything that's going on, like stopping and being like, okay, wait a minute, something's not right.
When I walk in the house after work, she's not excited to see me as I remember her when we first got married. And those were kind of the signs that I noticed. And so rather than me getting angry, I had to get humble and be like, hey, what's going on? And then you kind of came back and were like, well, you made work more important. And I was like, but I thought we were on the same page. And you were like, I'm fine with it. And this is a conversation we were having. I'm fine with it, but just realize this is the way it's going to be. And I was like, no, I refuse. And so for the past
And this isn't like over a couple days type thing. This is like a 5-year journey.
Yeah, it took us about 5 years to get to this place where I had emotionally pushed you away. And so my whole point in bringing this all up is like, have a life project. Absolutely. I think it is one of the greatest pieces of a healthy marriage.
That are like, it's something that's good for your marriage, and it's also serving other people.
Exactly.
Or helping other people, or it's somehow engaged with other people.
Yes. So you can kind of bring it full circle. But don't pretend, as I was, I wasn't even pretending. It was like the most truth reality I ever had. Don't think that it's going to serve every facet of your marriage or of your relationship. And that's what I had to come to grips with. And that's what I had to be like, totally laid out on the floor, like, what just happened? I thought I had this nailed.
Yeah, so like a life project is important in your marriage as a piece, but it's not the end-all say-all. It's not the answer to all of your problems.
Yeah, because marriage is complicated, and what serves one spouse in one marriage and serves one spouse in another marriage may not translate. So you have to come together with your spouse and say, okay, this is where we're going to start. And okay, 3 months in, 2 years in, okay, let's reevaluate. How you feeling? How we doing? Let's be honest. Like, that's what it takes, I think, to move forward. And these great books are what inspired us in this life project journey, which is why we're bringing this up. This is connected.
Yeah, and I do think, we have, there's lots of people that we know that are married, and yet it's like they don't do anything together. It's like the husband loves all these different things, and the wife's not interested, and the wife loves all these things, husband's not interested, they have separate friends, etc. And it's like, how do y'all do that? Like, how do you even stay married? And then us, on the other hand, where we're like, we love to make drinks together. Yeah. We love to cycle together. We love to snowboard together. Yeah. We love to read together. We just like, there's so many things that like bring us together in hobbies and like just a friendship that I can see where you were thinking like, we're fine.
We're great. Yeah.
It's just, obviously a marriage goes deeper than that.
Exactly. And it is more than a friendship. And our marriage is very, very much based on a friendship. And we could have conversations with y'all in the comment section. Like, was your marriage based on like being romantic first? Or was it based on like, you had like this wonder of the person? Because we kind of started off as friends. So to me, it was a natural like evolution that we would just continue to be deeper and deeper friends. Where I think maybe what you're saying is like, somebody started off their relationship in a romantic way. They had their friends, and then they came together romantic. They had their friends, and they came together romantic. So for them, it might be a totally normal situation that they go and they have their friends, and they come back home and they're romantic, right? And so like it's just a normal cycle.
Right, like I don't need a life project.
Yeah, I don't need a life project. I don't need a partner that's like hangs out with me all the time. It's just like I have my friends, and then we're romantic or whatever. Maybe that works for people. For us, like it didn't. And so like we're just wanting to bring out that other idea.
Because I don't think that it's good. Like, I don't think that a spouse should, like, go and have their separate, like, spouses shouldn't have their separate lives and then, like, just come together.
Why? Do you think it's, like, not long-term, like, sustainable, or what do you think?
I guess maybe I just don't like it. I
would hate it if you did
One of my friends, she's always like, yeah, my husband's going on his guy trip. Like, he's going on his guy trip. And I'm just like, what the heck is that? Like, what is a guy trip? Like, yeah, okay, maybe, like, every once in a while,
yeah, like, I went with my brother-in-law.
You had your guy, but I didn't like it.
Yeah. It was like one night.
Yeah.
But I'm okay with it too. So the thing is, like, we're both okay with being together.
I just don't think spouses should only be like a bed thing. It shouldn't just be like.
You just got real.
I don't. Like, I think that there should be so much more. Yeah. I mean, we're together a lot, and I think it's great. Like, we make each other better.
Yeah.
We know each other better than anybody knows us. So like when you're doing something that I don't think is good, I can like, talk to you about it. And I just feel like it's such a setup for being strangers, because then one day when you're not sexy anymore and like you're not ready to have like you're like woman's going through menopause and you don't want to be in bed with like your man anymore, then it's like, what do you have? If you never had anything other than sex, then what do you have now?
Yeah. And this goes back to our life project.
Life project.
And then also the emotional aspect. So
you have to have both, I think. Yeah. I mean, because then like, I don't want a platonic relationship.
Yeah, and neither do I. That's kind of like what I was feeling because I had pushed you away.
Because I am time spent.
Yeah,
like,
but not just time spent like here.
No.
Like doing business.
No,
like,
I need time spent like
good.
where it's like you're like dating me again. Like you're getting to know me again. Yeah. Because you like if you're not asking how I am, then I just feel like I'm just not being cared for, you know?
Exactly.
And even though I'm not like 100% I need romance all the time, I still want romance. Like I still want you to set aside time and be like, this is special time for just us.
Yeah.
There's no camera, there's no agenda other than just getting to know you more.
Yeah, because I'm a big agenda fan. I love agendas.
You're like, I need a purpose. Like what's the purpose?
What's the
purpose?
ROI on this date?
Yeah. Am I gonna make some money on this? Yeah, for sure. Am I gonna get some money in my piggy bank?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't like so it has to be both. And so I think that's like what we want people to see is that with your spouse, have some sort of project, but then don't be like, okay, this project's gonna answer all of our problems.
Yeah. And I think like I said earlier, the biggest advantage of like this project is it teaches you how to like problem solve together. And I think like it even helps us when our children are acting a certain way, and like we have to like, I want to approach it one way and you want to approach it another way, and we've learned how to not argue, but like almost debate. We've learned how to have a conversation, a discussion.
Conversation, yeah.
Yeah, we've learned how to have a conversation through this project, through other projects that we've worked on. And so we don't like get heated anymore because we realize we're just talking through this. Like we have, you know, what you've done with birth and being a doula and stuff. And so I've helped you through that journey of starting that business. And so then I've even learned in that way how to work with you, because you're like, well, this is my business. I'm like, well, this is how you should do it. And you're like, I don't think so. And I'm like, but what about this? And so we've learned how to have a conversation so that way when we're squeezed, we stop attacking one another.
Yeah.
And so we learn it long term how to work well together. But then don't forget the romance. We want to see more people enjoying their marriages in a long-term way. Being able to look back and kind of say like, wow, look what we've built together. Because it's like, we talk about building pillars where you go, wow, that happened in our 5th year of marriage. Cool. That happened in our 2nd year of marriage. Remember when we had no money to buy food in our 3rd year of marriage, and now look where we are in our 7th, and it's just, pillars are awesome.
Pillars that aren't just, I mean, you would call them status-y. Things that aren't just like, yeah, remember when we bought that cool car and it made us feel so great? Like, if it was an accomplishment maybe, but you don't like the whole thing of like, oh yeah, when we bought a big house or when we did that. Like that's why these projects kind of mean more than just, oh yeah, remember when we started making more money and then we started buying all the things that we wanted.
It's almost this blur rather than like a clear, like we did this thing.
Yeah.
It's like we just, you know, we hear about the idea of like income or lifestyle creep. You know, oh, remember when we just started having the boat and having the cars and all that? It doesn't really mean as much. It isn't like it isn't like we really did something together to accomplish that. It was like, well, you went to work, like I took care of the kids, and then we started buying more things. Like it just isn't as like, can't sink your claws into it in a positive way and be like, wow,
look at what we did.
What we did. It was so fulfilling. Even if it made no money.
Right.
It's just we built this together. And there's just something powerful about that, I think. Well, that's what we've been able to experience.
Yeah. And of course, this is the plan, right? This is the plan.
This is the plan, and plans shift. And we talked about that in a previous episode. Like, I'm all like, plan, we're going to accomplish it. And you're like, hey, let's check out this detour. And maybe the detour will bring us back. Like, you're more of the person who's like willing to kind of like sway away from the plan to kind of check out all our options. And I'm just like, we're hitting the plan. And so even in that, like a spouse and having a partnership in that, you can catch more color of life. Like you can see more of the big picture of life. You're not just so narrow-minded like I can be. Just like, go.
Yeah, and I think the whole point of the project is to help the spouses that we're talking to work together better. Like you've talked about how just recording these episodes, you've learned and you've really seen yourself interrupting me. And
I was like, oh.
Over the almost 7 years of our marriage, and then even when we were dating, you would interrupt while I had a thought, and I would get so overwhelmed that I would just like shut down. I was like, I don't even remember what I was talking about. I don't really want to talk about it anymore. And then you would get overwhelmed because you're like, no, just tell me. I'm going to pull it out of you. And I would just shut down. And you just didn't even understand the magnitude of interrupting and what it does. And then we started recording these episodes. And you saw it, and now we have such better conversation off camera.
Yes.
And so it's so encouraging when spouses start doing a project together and they start growing in areas. And of course, at first, it's going to be really rough. It's going to be ugly.
Yeah.
And as long as each one of the spouses is committed to doing it and pushing forward and growing then it's just going to make your marriage better
Yeah.
in more of the platonic areas of your marriage, of
Yes.
just the day-to-day, washing dishes, going to work, taking care of the kids,
Yeah.
etc. There's so much value in working together in that way.
Absolutely, yeah. And I know we talked about having a life project that, like, you know, kind of influences others, but that's not always possible. You know, I think about like your parents, like their life's projects have been remodeling homes.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what they love to do. But what it challenges them to do is work together.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're two different people with slightly different ideas, a goal.
Both
make the
very
house look
strong
beautiful.
personalities.
Yeah. But like they had to learn, like, okay, your mom's like, okay, your dad does this really well. And when they first started doing it together, it was like they fought over that. And now it's like your mom's like, you're going to do that. I'm going to do this. You're going to do that. I'll do this. And now like they're not like tearing each other's, you know, tearing at each other to like get the house done. It's more like this beautiful, succinct team making this house beautiful.
Right.
So, you know, even stuff like that, like you could even kind of poke fun. Oh, they like to do houses. It's like, no, that's their life project. Yeah. They love doing that, and it's built them a better marriage.
I think where you can always help others, though, in your life project that you've chosen to do together, is that you can always mentor somebody younger than you and show them your journey, which they have done. I mean,
that's true.
So many of my friends have like come to our dinner table and listened to our conversation, our family.
They're always
our family meal, and we sit down and we talk about everything. Yeah. And all my friends have always just loved that because they see that vulnerability and they see my parents that obviously there's been conflict and they're still very strong personalities.
Yes.
But they have like influenced so many of my friends while my friends have watched them in their marriage and in their family life. Yeah. And so there can always be room for our spouses that we're talking to share with others what they have done in their life project.
That's a good idea.
And help others.
Yeah, and say like, this is how this has influenced us and made us better together.
Like we should always share our journeys with people because we have no idea who we're going to influence in a positive way.
And that's the whole point of the great conversation, right? We want others to join in the conversation. We want to have this be something that we do together with a community of people. And so for you, we want to hear about maybe your spouse, your partner, your life project, what you guys are doing in a way that just encourages the community. Like, just tell us what you're doing. I'm curious. Like, this is what we've chosen.
If you're doing anything, if you've never thought about it before and you're like, wow, this might be a really good idea or a terrible idea.
You guys are ridiculous. As in, you know, you're commenting that to us. Let us know. We'll see you on the next episode of The Great Conversation.